yesterday I was thinking of how intensely human this thing is, of like having on one side this drive and desire to go beyond what we have, and at the same time this extremely important need to feel grounded into something that is very close to us on a like perceptual level, that something that is immediate to our body and that makes us feel safe. Part of the work was to include all these questions of scale and this like distancing, both that they were present in the space but also in our bodies. So for instance, how we are working in duration. In my view, there is quite a difference between moving slow and taking time for an observation. When I'm working with the body and I'm in a state of observation, we are going, in order for that movement to be otherwise said slow, but actually it's just very small. It's just going to the almost microscopic level of like sensing how this form is changing and wants to change in relation to the space, in relation to one another. I think the space of AROS was always central to the thinking of the work that I was going to develop, both as conceptually, because then we wanted to use the corridors and the staircase. There was something that interested me, that was like the space in between, and so that would mean also in relation to a public, this encounter with in while you are in a space in between, while you are transitioning maybe from one gallery to another. The fascination with the space, I kind of perceive it as a body that contains all of these like forces, directions, and different weights and different curves all at once. They are like continuously articulating, even if they are like into one architecture. Lines and curves, the spiral staircase, it's like the spine of the building. It's so beautiful that at the end, of towards the last floor, then it elongates. It's just longer than the other. It's more tight up in the beginning, and then towards the down, it kind of it gets longer. It was like a release into the bottom. So it's very fluid liquids going up and down. And I think that this interest and this observation of the space at the beginning was very strong. Was a lot of the focus was going towards that. So also the way that we were approaching, how do we move through the space? It was a lot about how does our body relate to all these directions? How can we embody all these directions and take the suggestion of the space to recognize shapes? And then also how the building moves through us. And I think that at some point along the process, it was almost like giving it too much importance. We were too subject to the space, and I had to find another way for the bodies to move through it. In a way, what I also recognize is that the quality of this space is that it always has the capacity to hold and frame, but with softness, and we live in space. So it's not an authoritarian framing You always have the possibility to escape that frame because there are so many flights of escape. You can see through. You can you're seen from all directions basically. So it's very soft. In a sense, we didn't need to highlight that relation. We just need to give attention to it, to be aware of these possibilities that the space offers. But at the same time, we also had to bring another sense to it. The shift happens once after the first performance, that at some point during the performance I felt that I asked myself, and I asked Naya and the other performers, I was like, what if we think of AROS as a big garden and we are hanging out in a garden? It is quite intriguing to bring attention and notice relations with more people than just one. And also the constellations of relations that emerge are constantly transforming, even in this very extended sense of time. that happen, and also the way that the space becomes inhabited, it gets a little bit more rich and flourishing in a sense to the space in relation to one another. And at the same time, we are doing this microscopic work into this like huge building. So when staying into a state where we are working on a microscopic level and things are taking such a long time, then we also become extremely vulnerable to the gaze of the public. We are very exposed. It can be very precarious state and fragile, where then we see how people maybe stop and look at us from other floors, from other corners of the buildings and other angles. All of these things are, for me, in the work, not to be taken as a negative aspects, actually as a very positive things. But however, it is a slight provocation for the gaze of a public that is passing by in a corridor and don't know how to relate to it. Some they do take time to observe and are more curious, but there are all kinds of feelings and reactions that can emerge. There is a conversation with a teenager that was generous and in sharing, and he was so genuine. And somehow, I don't know, maybe I myself didn't expect it, that he was going to be like this. So it was kind of like a beautiful surprise. What comes to your mind if I say home? It's slightly personal or intimate, I would say. It's a little bit on the edge with private, but they choose how much to go into that. And I can see people getting emotional. As they talk and as they share with us about their sense of home, then we invite them to tell us a little bit more about their senses, like smells and textures, colors, or what's the landscape around the environment that they are describing. The planet, they were there at some point at the beginning, then they disappeared, and then they came back. We drove back into our slow working, hanging out and traversing the corridors of AROS. Then we're also talking with each other, between the performers, flourishing these planets from what people are telling us. So we start to create a constellation of planets that are basically the subjective experience of people. It creates a new galaxy, basically, of senses, of homes. We call it a threading and weaving. We talked about, like, what if it was a garden? At the beginning, it's more of a like performance tool. But as we go along and we talk with people, it does become a garden. When I start the performance, comparing to after I talk to a number of people, the whole sense of the space changes for me, because I have all these sensations that I'm carrying with me, and then I'm sharing also with the other performers. And so also the walls and the floor of the museum like starts to take like another quality somehow. I don't know if it's fiction, but there is all these other layers of senses that are like permeating the performance.